After a cosmic catastrophe, an astronaut finds himself in an escape pod drifting inexorably toward the sun. With certain death only 100 kilometers away, the astronaut suddenly sees something. After an accident in space, astronaut Troy Holloway regains consciousness aboard an escape pod. He's injured, and beside him lies the body of his colleague. Troy attempts to contact anyone who could offer help, but to no avail. Both navigation equipment and radio communications are offline. The only functioning device is a beacon on his bracelet. Unexpectedly, Station Hathor 18 responds. Pilot Roberts explains she's temporarily filling in for the commander and is ready to assist. Troy explains that a drill breached a pocket on an asteroid, causing a steam eruption followed by an explosion. As a result, the mining station's hull was compromised, forcing an emergency evacuation. Now he's drifting without thrust or control, with limited power and non-functional diagnostics. Only the radio, cooling chamber, and life support systems remain operational. The rest of the crew is dead. He can't determine his location, though Roberts can detect the beacon on his bracelet. However, the pilot reports difficulty pinpointing his exact position and asks Troy for coordinates. Sarcastically, Troy describes the space outside the window, knowing it won't help. From his perspective, neither Hathor 18 nor any other ship is visible. The only upside is that he's not seriously injured. Eventually, Roberts manages to lock onto his bracelet, though calculating a path to his capsule will take some time. Just as Troy settles into wait, he suddenly realizes that his pod is hurtling straight toward the sun. He demands Roberts connect him with the commander, but she refuses and instead requests he perform a medical diagnostic. Troy reminds her that the instruments don't work. Roberts then admits she's under orders to save him at all costs, though Troy can't understand why he's so valuable to the company. The astronaut conducts a self-examination, noting a minor head injury, which alarms Roberts. She bombards him with questions, trying to gauge the injury's severity. Troy becomes irritated by her inexplicable concern, but complies, giving his full name and company affiliation: Ortis, an asteroid mining corporation specializing in mining near-Earth asteroids Amor and Apollo, rich in minerals. He's an engineer-geologist whose task on this mission was to locate minerals such as indium, osmium, gallium, cobalt, rhodium, platinum, palladium, and water. Sarcastically, he offers to recite the entire periodic table if Roberts wants. Realizing he's close to losing his temper, Roberts admits they've also lost contact with Central Command, making it impossible to connect him to leadership. It turns out Hathor 18 was also damaged by debris, their technical assistant was injured, and the commander is busy making repairs. However, they have successfully pinpointed his location, and although he's headed directly for the sun, the oxygen generators are operational. On the downside, thrusters and rotational systems are offline, as are the contamination control and water regeneration systems and cabin temperature control. Worse yet, the cooling system seems damaged, causing temperatures to plummet rapidly and risking death by hypothermia. Troy must manually disable the cooler. Yet, as already established, he's hurtling toward the sun, whose direct radiation at this distance could cause severe burns. There's another issue. There's been a radiation leak in the radiation chamber, and Troy's exposure will steadily increase. Checking the radiation symbol on his bracelet as Roberts explains the plan, Troy listens as she says they must intercept him before radiation levels become critical. It won't be easy, but she assures him she'll manage, planning to reach him in approximately 75 minutes. Troy is baffled. His capsule lacks an airlock, the thrusters and accelerators don't function, and power is minimal. How could she possibly intercept him? Roberts explains that since the capsule is pressurized, opening the hatch would propel him directly toward Hathor 18. Still skeptical due to his high speed, Troy again asks why the corporation is so intent on saving him. He's just an ordinary employee. Roberts evades the question, citing orders. If there's any chance to save his life, she will. Troy then requests to contact home, and Roberts promises to arrange it within the hour. After some thought, Troy questions whether the company understood the risks when ordering them to push the mining equipment to maximum capacity. Was this disaster all for just one extra shipment of minerals? But Roberts shifts the conversation back to his condition. The bracelet signals the onset of hypothermia. He must shut down the cooling system while he still can. Troy, however, prefers freezing over burning alive. He does have an evacuation suit, but it only has 15 minutes of oxygen. So he'll have to endure as long as possible before putting on the suit, which might help him survive until rescue arrives. Suddenly, Troy notices cracks forming on the cabin window. Roberts explains it's thermal shock. The glass can't handle extreme temperature differences between its inner and outer surfaces. Troy urgently needs to shut down the cooler and endure rising temperatures for as long as possible. Again, Troy begs her to connect him with home, but Roberts reminds him that if he doesn't disable the cooling system, he won't be speaking to anyone ever again. Reluctantly, the astronaut gets to work. The compartment is colder than Antarctica, so he must act quickly. Troy moves toward the necessary controls, but the communication link abruptly cuts out. He proceeds blindly, grabbing the lever so forcefully that his glove and skin from his fingers remain stuck to it. Despite this, he successfully disables the cooler. Returning to the main cabin, the communication reconnects. Roberts sympathizes, knowing things will only get worse from here. Troy admits there's another injury, a wound in his side sustained when debris penetrated the capsule. With temperatures now rising, he'll lose more blood and the pain will become unbearable. He must treat the wound immediately. Troy locates the med kit, bandages his injured hand, and extracts a shard from his side. The wound requires cauterizing. Searching through his deceased colleague's pockets for anything useful, he finds a family photograph and a lighter, which he uses to cauterize the injury, losing consciousness in the process. When Troy regains consciousness, he reconnects with Roberts, who is deeply concerned about his silence. She warns him to brace for a sharp increase in temperature. Troy insists she connect him to her commander, whom he knows personally, but Roberts again refuses. Finally, she reveals the truth. The commander died in the same accident. She hid it from Troy to prevent panic. At that moment, debris strikes Troy's capsule again, sending it into an uncontrollable spin. Unexpectedly, Troy orders Roberts to turn around and retreat from the hazardous zone. She begs him to stay connected and let her save him, but Troy goes silent. Roberts desperately tries to reach him as Troy crawls toward the hatch, determined to end it all. Reaching the hatch, he urges her again to retreat, knowing she'll continue risking her life as long as he remains alive. Roberts begs for a chance to save him as Troy stretches his hand toward the release handle, but his grip fails and he collapses. Another piece of debris strikes, stabilizing the capsule's rotation. Troy regains consciousness. He must endure the increasing heat for another 10 minutes. After that, he'll hide in the evacuation suit for 15 minutes until the capsule ejects him toward the rescue ship. Troy pleads for a way to contact his wife and speak to her. Roberts suddenly admits she never wanted to work in mining or become a pilot. Her father was a pilot on Hathor 1, but an injury ended his career prematurely. He encouraged her to become a pilot instead. She pursued the education, passed the exams and tests, and has piloted Hathor 18 for the past 17 years. Now she's acting commander. Troy shares his decision to retire early, eliciting laughter from Roberts. Then growing serious, he says he needs to apologize to his wife. They had a son. A sudden thud interrupts him, and in the next instant, debris punctures the capsule wall. Pressure rapidly drops, forcing Troy to quickly put on his suit. After some time, emergency lights activate. Troy reconnects with Roberts, reporting that his life support battery is at 95%, but oxygen levels have dropped to 18%. The cabin pressure has fully depleted. Automated systems have sealed off access to the remaining reserve oxygen. He considers going outside to seal the breach, which would restore pressure and trigger the reserve tank, propelling him toward Hathor 18 at the right moment. However, even with the suit, radiation and heat exposure outside would kill him within minutes. Realizing he's out of options, Troy begs Roberts again to leave and not endanger her crew, but she admits turning back is not an option. She's under orders to retrieve him. At least one crew member must survive, as a disaster that kills an entire team would lead to shutting down the entire operation. If Troy survives, there would be years of extensive investigation, but the corporation would remain operational. Hearing the disappointment in Troy's voice, Roberts admits that she would have come after him even without the orders. He thanks her for the kind words, but insists it's still the end for him. Radiation exposure has already caught up. Despite this, Roberts refuses to turn back. Troy then begins speaking about his son, a bright 6-year-old boy who used to invent wonderful things. After tragedy struck, Troy simply ran away. Now he desperately wants to apologize to his wife. Suddenly, Roberts interrupts him. His wife doesn't need an apology. She herself lost her daughter 7 years earlier. Her husband couldn't cope and eventually left. All these years, she only wished he would just hold her and say that he loved her. Moved by her words, Troy quietly disconnects, gazing out toward the approaching sun. Then, unexpectedly, he remembers the new prototype gloves tucked in his deceased colleague's pockets. He quickly puts them on and asks Roberts how to patch the hull breach in the chamber so he can restore cabin pressure and eject toward her ship. Roberts warns him that outside he'll be exposed directly to solar radiation, 370 degrees Celsius. Troy jokes that he'll just work in the shade. Guiding him carefully, Roberts helps Troy locate the damaged area, watching closely through the pod's camera. Troy enters open space and moves along the hull toward the breach. Suddenly, he feels severely ill. Roberts immediately recognizes it as radiation sickness and urges him to hurry. In 5 minutes, he'll be directly exposed to solar rays and incinerated. With great difficulty, Troy finds the breach and begins repairs, all the while imagining himself on vacation in Alaska. Meanwhile, his oxygen level drops to 3%. Roberts announces that the whole breach is sealed and instructs Troy to return immediately. However, his oxygen is nearly gone, and Troy is on the brink of losing consciousness. With his last strength, he drags himself back into the capsule and activates the emergency oxygen tank. Oxygen levels restore to 7%. Troy tries to contact Roberts again just as a beam of sunlight pierces through the window, burning his face. He desperately shields himself as Roberts urges him to eject from the capsule. She can already see him. Troy, feeling as though he's burning alive in the suit, pleads with her to turn back. Roberts screams that she's almost there and begs him not to give up. The oxygen continues dropping, but Troy suddenly recalls his son's memory and announces that he won't surrender. At last, he's connected to his wife. Hearing her voice, Troy instructs Roberts to get ready. He's going out. His oxygen is nearly depleted. As he whispers that he's coming home, the capsule's window shatters. Yet another low-budget space survival story, essentially a one-man show. There's nothing particularly new or remarkable here. Definitely a one-time watch, and even then, not for everyone.